Good morning, everyone. So, here to talk about business models and why they always seem to go off the rails and how to fix them. You know, everyone wants that magical pony. So, I've been doing living games, online games, business models for about 20 years. Generally encapsulated between 3DO, where I got my start working on Meridian 59, which has been spawned so many online games. The founders of Niantic came from there. All sorts of fun stuff. Sony Online, Tryon, Jagex. Really seen almost every business model there is, but I think one of the things that's interesting here is 3DO, which tried really hard to do online games and a lot of things, no longer with us. Sony became Daybreak. Yes, my friends. Tryon got absorbed, and I think only Jagex is the one that's still running healthy. Figuring out that right business model, figuring out how to interact with your players, it's not easy. And you think like, oh man, I've been doing this 20 years. It's still the Wild West, right? There's still no established formula, do this, and it works. So here's some of the games that I've worked on, some of the different business models that we've seen from them. Back from Meridian 59, where we're doing session-based stuff, where from a Monday through Friday, you'd play per day that you'd pay. You'd get the weekend free if you did 5 games. So it was a way to incentivize people to play on weekends and peak your concurrency. To Sony, where we did all sorts of different things with subscription models, bundling them up, different price points, finding what's the magic to reach the player. To Tryon, we're really taking a look at the market go through a transition. You look at Rift, it started out as a sub-game and then went to free-to-play transition, and then brought the sub-game back as a premium membership, which seemed to be more and more popular, to Defiance, that shipped as a premium game with MTX and DLC, right? And so versus nowadays we're at Runescape, which is pure membership and free-to-play, with a little bit of MTX, and Runescape, which is pure membership and should always remain that way, right? There's so much to choose from. There's so many different ways. It's really just figuring out what's going on. And the core of it is you're in a relationship, right? When you're doing box products, you're dating. You're selling something, you're putting it together, there's a one-time purchase, and you're done. Find the next box, right? So serial dating versus when you have games as a service, a living game, the online business model, you're in a relationship with the player over time. And it's important that you, as a person driving that business, figure out how it is that you can carry your end in that relationship. And so some of the key things are you need to deliver content on a constant beat. The business model that you're in kind of describes what it is that you're going to be doing, right? So if you're in a subscription game, you think about the long game, because people are paying you money over time for lots and lots of content, and so you want to be giving them stuff that they can consume at their leisure, but it's more long-form content, very big, versus if you're an MTX-driven game, it's more what's happening today, right? And you're giving them pulses that every day that they log in, there's something new, there's a different price for something, and it's a completely different way to drive it, and it's important for you to realize what business you're in and making sure that you're serving the expectations of the player within that business. So then the next thing is to drive the player satisfaction, right? Is what you're providing them, do they actually like it, right? And so you have to listen to them for that, right? What sort of feedback are you getting from them? How are you getting it? And then you have to defend them, right? One of the big things when you are in this relationship and you're sort of obsessing about your players and how it is that they're thriving in your ecosystem is, do they feel you have their backs? Do you feel that you're defending their best interests, right? When you enter in this relationship with them, you really have this social contract with them, and you're sort of saying, I'm going to provide you this sort of content, and I'm going to be consistent about it, and you can have clear expectations from me, and then from their part as a player, it's like, hey, I'm going to be loyal, I'm going to continue to play your game so long as you abide by these agreements. Generally, when things go bad, it's because you're doing something wrong, because you're breaking the rules of the relationship with your players, or maybe you haven't thought about the business model and how it integrates with your game. And so that brings you to what's wrong, right? And it's really the combination of what's going on within your game between the core loops, the social contract, what's there. So if you're at the onset of development and you're not thinking about what your business model is from day one, you're probably making a mistake. Because if you've got your core game loop and you're really thinking about like, hey, this is great, my guys are going out, and they're leveling up, and they're getting more loot, and da-da-da, and then you're trying to add monetization on top of it, rather than at the same time and how they work together and how they're additive to one another, the players are going to know. It's going to look slapped together, it's going to look rough, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time chasing it, because it's not organic, it feels very Frankenstein, and they're not going to like it. And so it's always worth spending the time to get that right. Have a longer, private beta, have a longer closed alpha, right? Whatever it is you can do to establish that relationship and make sure that you have this very organic experience for your players is the number one thing. The other one is don't cheat, and in particular, don't get caught cheating, right? I love these memes. This is one where if you're a subscription game and then you decide to add MTX to it, and then you start focusing completely on MTX, which is that daily what's going on, at the expense of the long form, the deep content that the players are really paying you really good money for over time, they're going to notice that and they're going to get frustrated and they're going to drop out. So it's quite imperative that you spend a huge amount of time making sure that you're honoring, that relationship, and you're feeding them the content that they want. But there's a lot of different ways to deal with it, right? Everyone wants the magical business model. Everyone wants, it to sing and to hum and to have, really happy players that really enjoy giving you money. You know what they do, right? You have analytics set up in your game, and so you can see where they're playing, where they're dropping out, where they're spending their time, where the player engagement is really working, and where it isn't. You need to pay attention to this. And so it's really that player intelligence and understanding at a deep, deep level what it is they like, what they don't like, and going from there. And it's the same thing with business intelligence. You can see what they're paying, what they're enjoying, what they see the value in, and you really want to give them what they want, right? Some things are easy. And then customer satisfaction scores, right? Your CSAT scores, making sure that the content that you're giving them is something that they're really happy with. So you have all these metrics that are how they behave, right, versus what they say. And oftentimes there's this huge difference between, you can have this player base like, oh, things are lovely, I love your game, and then you look at the analytics, like, wow, everyone's dropping out, my day 30 retention sucks, what's going on here? And then you have to look at the player behavior, right? It's that mixture of what they tell you and how they communicate versus how they're actually behaving. And you, as the adroit business people that you are, need to be, have your finger on the pulse and start addressing the problems. The other thing is, right, frustrated players vent, right? The engaged players are in your game and they're playing and, they're having a grand old time. The frustrated players get out of the game and they look for all these different ways to rail against the machine, right? But you have all these different vectors on how you can engage with them, right? Your community management is at the forefront. They're out, they're talking to the players, they're dealing with them on events and things like that. They're a really great way to get the pulse of what's going on. I think great undervalued resource. Same thing with customer service or player support. These are the guys that are getting the tickets. These are the guys that are hearing the complaints coming in from the people. You have to address them, right? You can't just ignore them. The other thing that I think is hugely undervalued, your dev team needs to play the game with the players, right? If you get to the point where the devs aren't playing anymore, there's this huge disconnect. And again, you go back to, hey, I'm in this relationship, and if you're not doing your part in the relationship and actually being current and understanding how the game is playing now versus a year ago versus 5 years ago, you're doing your players a great disservice, and so you need to give your devs enough time during the day to play, right? It shouldn't be something they do in their off hours. It shouldn't be something that, like this weekend you're all going to play. It's like, no, as part of the course of business, play the damn game. And it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer or an artist or a designer or a producer. The more you understand the game, the more you understand your players, the better your product is going to be at the end of the day. And you really have to drive that home, because I think, again, you're like, oh, deadlines are tight and we've got all this stuff to get out, and if I don't deliver the content by this date, it's not going to work. Well, if you deliver the content that the players don't want, you've hit a deadline, but who cares, right? Again, the engaged players aren't necessarily going to tell you the problem. It's the ones that aren't. And then, there's the social networks, and it's the double-edged sword, right? Because there's no filter. And there's nothing worse for your ego than a Monday morning Reddit session, right? These are all the wrong things that have happened with your game, and your company is the great Satan, and this person's awful. But there's a lot of insight, because if things are trending, you can sort of filter out all the haters and get to something that's actually actionable. And the key thing is address their issues. And so this to me is really the part where what we do in games, it's always this mix of art and science, right? And I think that there's a trend right now, and particularly with the advent of mobile and the 1001 analytics company, that it's like science, 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 science. You got to remember the art side, right? And what we're doing is entertainment. People are paying you to have fun. They're paying you for escapism. They're paying you for some sort of fantasy or wish fulfillment. Make them happy, right? Find different ways to make that work. And so I think it's being scientifically creative and having that good mix of art and science, and finding that as the best way to serve your player base. So I think the big thing here is questions, right? I'd really love to hear from you guys and understand some of the struggles that you guys are having, and see if there's anything we can do to fix it. Or not.
Anyone?
How have you coped with the changes in the game? Things have changed obviously since you guys started. How have you guys coped with that change?
Constant. I mean, at Jagex right now, RuneScape just celebrated its 20th birthday. So thank you for that pointed question. So really over time, I think a lot of it has been, there's been a constancy in the memberships, right, which is essentially a sub. We've changed the price over time, right, as the economy's gone. A few years ago, we added some microtransaction elements to the game, because the players were looking for a little bit more than what was just happening in the sub. And so I think that for us in a journey, it's been making sure that we pay attention that at the end of the day, the fundament of RuneScape is a subscription business, and it is that long-form entertainment. And while we may dabble with the MTX, it's a matter of that prioritization, right? And I think this goes to a little bit of that don't cheat type of thing. And so it's understanding that at the core, we need to be developing that long-form content. And yes, we have this daily thing for people that are quite interested in it, but it's secondary to the primary experience. On Old School, we have a radically different experience. Old School came to being because we changed our combat system, and about half of our player base did not like the change, right? And so we listened to them, and we rolled back a version a couple years later of the game from a magnetic tape of all things, and asked them, like, hey, would you like us to roll this up, and they said, yes, we would. But the really interesting thing with that game is no feature, no content goes in the game without a 75% upvote, right? So the player investment and them feeling that they have a stake in the future is beautiful in that game, right? And I think more so than maybe any game in the market. And I love all my children. I love RuneScape. I love Old School, but Old School's something special. That 75% upvote, the players feeling like they control their destiny, that they really have a feel for the future. And because it was based on rebellion, right? We did not like the change that you did. We want to have a vote. We want to have a say. Bringing them on board like that is the best thing we ever did. Please.
Before a new game releases, do you count more on press and influencers perhaps, or is it just going by the crowd you have already?
I really try and stay away from binary answers because game development is so complex, it's really no one thing, and trends change all the time. So I really encourage you at the beginning to have small groups of players that are playing your game, that are giving you honest feedback. Set up a Slack channel or something like that, some way to engage them. If you're dealing with an existing IP, I would actually split it into a couple different control groups, right? These are the people that love your IP and want to make sure your new game is brand authentic, and these are people that love the genre that you're in and you want to make them both happy. I think that one of the dangers when doing a new product that's potentially off genre is it's the Reese's peanut butter cup, right? Everyone thinks like, your peanut butter, my chocolate, it'll make this awesome, awesome snack. And too many people don't look at the Venn diagram of two different things colliding, and it's actually the narrow space, not the giant space. So getting that player engagement early, absolutely influencers, right? But it's those players you're engaging with hopefully can become those influencers, right? Wean your own. I find that when you go out, there is a time and a place to ask established influencers to look at your stuff, but if you can groom your own, again, you have that relationship. It's an online game. It's a living game. The more that they can be there from ground one, they're going to be a much stronger advocate for you. They're going to be emotionally invested in what it is you're doing, and so really encourage those relationships.
To what extent do you let the kind of players drive the direction of the game, and what kind of dangers do you kind of let them just go with what the players want, or do you think it's important to also keep to what you
To me, at some level, that's kind of like the myth of user-generated content, right? Everyone's like, the Holy Grail, I've made like these dev tools and players can create all their content. We're the professionals, right? I love the players. They pay me, right? They pay all the people that I work with. They're not necessarily the best game designers. Some are, but generally it's like 1%. Take a look at any sort of mod community, like Neverwinter or any shooter or things like that. The most played maps, there's generally like 1% of the people make them, 90% of the people go from there, right? So if you're relying on the crowd or the hive mind to design your game, it's going to be a little chaotic and it's not going to be necessarily the most quality driven, versus if you're interacting with them and you're saying, hey, there's 3 different directions that I could go, A or B or C, what do you think about each one, and they're like, hey, C is the one we'd really like to focus on and go from there. I think that you need to provide them a little bit of guidance, a little bit of training wheels, but by all means have the conversation with them. You're the responsible one, you're the one that has to make the content and get it done, but they're your customer, and so the more you're giving them what you want, the better off you're going to be. Sir?
So you guys have released an app for the old school Runescape, right?
Yes. It is came out in October, and it is old school on mobile. It is the 100% the same product, complete cross-play, and on PC, pick up on mobile, continuous.
Is there an intention to enter esports anytime soon?
Excuse me. Yeah, in old school in particular, we run deadband tournaments as our esports. We did a all-star version late last year that I think we ended up being the #2 watched esport behind Fortnite. So for us, esports is a really big initiative, particularly for the old school title. it's another really interesting way to engage with players. Deadman for us, it's a PvP challenge, generally runs on a quarterly basis, and just as you get to the finals, as you know, less and less people survive, viewership gets higher and higher and higher, and people really want to see the journey of you making this character from scratch, competing against all these people, and you know who's going to be the winner at the end. So yeah, huge believers in it, but it's the right thing for old school. For RuneScape, right now, we haven't really found a good esports solution for them, but they're not really looking for it, and like you need to be okay with that. And again, like you don't want to force something down their throat that they don't want.